welcome to tonight's school board meeting. It's Monday, July 27, 2020. It is 6:43 and we're in the auditorium of the high school. I can call the meeting to order and ask Mr. Kevin to call roll, please.
Mrs. Fisher.
Here.
Mr. Gayhart.
Here.
Mrs. Ingersoll.
Here.
Mr. Martell.
Here.
Mr. O'Donnell.
Here.
Mrs. Ray.
Here.
Mr. Scarrow.
Here. And we do have a quorum, and we'll continue. I will note that this meeting has been noticed for state statutes. Do we have any community participation? Anyone who would like to speak prior to the meeting?
I do have, Mr. O'Donnell, 3 email communications that requested for those to be read into the record. If you'd like to start that. Okay, the first email is from Kristen Hovistel, and Kristen said, "Hi, Mr. Shadlock. I'm Kristen Hovistel. I'd like to request that this brief email would be read at tonight's board meeting. I have 3, soon to be 4, sons enrolled in Elkhorn schools. They are excellent students, but we struggle greatly with distance learning in the spring. I am mindful of the plan already proposed and trust that the board will act responsibly for the students and families in our district. In order to be sure my voice is heard, I would like to ask the board to consider a full reopening plan that does not require students of any age to wear masks all day. I'm open to a compromise of wearing them only in certain situations, but I do feel that all-day mask wearing will cause more problems, both from a mental/physical health standpoint and educational standpoint. I would also like the board to be especially mindful of procedures after positive tests in schools. We all know it will happen, but I am asking that the procedures be based in common sense rather than panic and in place in such a way that families can make decisions based on their own circumstances. I do not feel a yo-yo method of in and out of actual school would be healthy for anyone. I think overall flexibility would be the best fit for Elkhorn, keeping in mind the families in need, working families, single parent families, special needs, and gifted students. My hope is that the different scenarios will be outlined clearly enough that families can make educated decisions about this fall based on their own needs and wants. Thank you for your hard work and consideration, Kristen Huddlestone." The next email communication I have is from James Cody. He said, "Hi, Mr. Shadlock. Please submit my comments below to be read at the board meeting Monday, July 27th. Please let me know that you received this." I did give him a confirmation. "Members of the Elkhorn Area School Board, my name is Jim Cody, and I'm a lifetime resident of Walworth County, 16 years in Elkhorn. I currently have 2 children enrolled in the district. I'm asking you to reject any school reopening plan that would require students to wear face coverings of any sort while in school. There have been no studies released that provide any evidence that these masks provide any protection against the virus. In fact, unless it is properly fitted medical masks, the packaging material these masks are sold in state they do not provide any protection against viral infection. Furthermore, according to the Wisconsin Department of Health Services, there have been 0 deaths of any person under the age of 19 in the state of Wisconsin from this virus. At the time of this writing, the Walworth County Health and Human Services website lists only 41 active cases, with 2 in the hospital. Approximately 102,000 people live in Walworth County. That is 0.04% of the population. Young people have proven they are not at risk of this virus, and I believe any mask requirements could be detrimental to the health of anyone forced to wear them on a daily basis for hours at a time. Children would be constantly fidgeting with the masks in school, and everything that was on their hands will be on the masks. Not to mention other students grabbing their classmates' masks and masks dropped in their lunch, getting on or off the bus, in the hallways, and on and on. If you have school staff or students that would like to wear them, let them do so, but do not force my children to wear something detrimental to their own health. Respectfully, Jim Cody." The final email that I received was from Natalie McGinnis. It said, "Elkhorn School Board members, I am terrified to send my children back to school without a mandate for masks and with so many children in the building at one time. Hearing that Elkhorn has a plan to do so has forced me to begin the process of sending my kids to school in Burlington. We have a safer plan, in my opinion, where masks are mandated. They also have a plan that limits the amount of kids in the building at one time. They plan to use the hybrid method. Half of the kids Monday, Tuesday, and the other half Tuesday, Thursday, Friday. I was told that if we wanted to do a somewhat virtual option, the Charter School in Elkhorn was the place to go. However, that's only the case for 8th grade and up. If you keep the younger kids home, it's homeschool curriculum. Please add safety measures to your plan. I have 3 asthmatics that need your protection. Thank you. Those are the 3 email communications I received.
Anyone else who would like to speak? It's in the audience. I have a mic.
Is there any other public comment from the audience?
Raise your hand high. Okay, not hearing any, so we'll dispense with the rest of that, and we'll move on to some other business. We have need to approve our school board meeting minutes. So we have regular and closed session school board meeting minutes from July 13th. You should have the regular minutes attached to your agenda. Also, closed session I passed out before the meeting. And then there is the regular session of July 20th. I believe everyone was present at both, so we probably could do them all together too, but it's up to you. You can individually too. So any discussion on that? Hearing none, looking for a motion.
I'll move to approve the minutes of July 13th, 2020 regular and closed session school board meetings, as well as the regular session from July 20th, 2020 as presented.
Is there a second? Then moved and seconded to approve the minutes.
We will have to break off the closed session. I'll have to abstain from that because I don't have a copy.
Oh, that's right. You know the copy.
You want to reread that?
You want to start over?
Sure. I'll move to approve the minutes of July 13th, 2020 regular and the July 20th regular session school board meeting as presented.
Is there a second to that? Then moved and seconded to approve the minutes, the regular session minutes of July 13th, 2020 and July 20th, 2020 as presented. Roll call vote, please.
Mrs. Fisher?
Yes.
Mr. Gayheart?
Yes.
Mrs. Ingersoll?
Yes.
Mr. Martell?
Yes.
Mr. O'Donnell?
Yes.
Mrs. Ray?
Yes.
Mr. Scarrow?
Yes.
Motion carried. So then we would need to approve our closed session.
I'll move to approve the July 13th, 2020 closed session school board meeting as presented.
Is there a second? So moved and seconded to approve the July 13th closed session school board meeting as presented. Roll call vote, please.
Mrs. Fisher?
Yes.
Mr. Gayheart?
Yes.
Mrs. Ingersoll?
Yes.
Mr. Martell?
Abstain.
Mr. O'Donnell?
Yes.
Mrs. Ray?
Yes.
Mr. Scarrow?
Yes.
Motion carried. General and other fund bills, Mr. Truman.
The general and other fund bills this evening covers checks number 140325 through 140420, wire numbers 44 through 57, ACH check numbers 005 through 010, options renovation wire number 043, combined amount of $290,884.90. And then there was a memo provided some additional information on the bills in your packet. I think at the end of the bill package is a copy of the treasurer's report month.
Questions for Mr. Truman? Board members? Hearing none, looking for motion.
I move to approve the general and other fund bills July 27, 2020, check number 140325 to 140420, wire numbers 57, ACH check number 005 to 010, and options number 043 in the combined amount of $290,884.90.
Is there a second?
I'll second it.
It has been moved and seconded to approve the general and other fund bills of July 27, 2020, checks numbered 140325 to 140420, wire numbers 44 to 57, ACH check number 005 to 010, and options renovation wire number 043, and a combined amount of $250,884.90 as presented. Roll call vote.
Mrs. Fisher?
Yes.
Mr. Gayheart?
Yes.
Mrs. Ingersoll?
Yes.
Mr. Martell?
Yes.
Mr. O'Donnell?
Yes.
Mrs. Ray? Mr. Scarrow?
Yes.
Motion carried. Approval of the 2020-2021 school reopening plan. Mr. Tedlock.
Okay, this is a condensed version of our full plan. If there's any questions from the board members, I'm happy to go into any of the other sections in more depth. But I did want to break it down to that overarching plan and make sure we have that information for everyone. Okay, our goals for today in this board meeting is to review that overarching plan that we developed for the entire school district in regards to the starting of school or reopening of schools, discuss and answer any questions that you may have, and then review and discuss PPE for students and staff that we're proposing. We also have a recommended action to consider the recommendation to improve the reopening of schools as presented, and providing myself the authority to move between and modify instructional models and plans as needed. As we began development of this plan back in early as May, what we've seen is it's a fluid and a dynamic process and situation. We receive new recommendations, new information on a semi-regular basis, and being over 6 weeks out from the start of school, I suspect we may have more changes prior to the start of the school year. I want to start off by sharing a video. I know the school board has seen this, but I want to make sure that our public sees that as well. The foundational basis for which we base this plan off of is guidance from the CDC. And I think Dr. FAUCI does a nice job of articulating what our focus should be, who we should be working with, and determining what the plan should be and what it should look like. So I'm going to go ahead and share this video.
As a general principle, we should try as best as possible to keep the children in school for the reasons that the unintended downstream ripple effect consequences of keeping the kids out of school and the impact on working families and on other aspects of society can be profound, not to mention the negative effect on the children. So as a principle, we should try as the default to get the kids to stay in school. However, that's going to vary from where you are in the country and what the dynamics of the outbreak are in your particular region. So that's the reason why, although the fundamental principle is there, the one other guiding principle that is overriding is the safety and the welfare of the children and the safety and the welfare of the teachers. So you've got to take that into consideration. So if you're in the part of a country where the dynamics of the outbreak are really minimal, if at all, then there's no problem at all in getting it back. If you're in a situation where you're in outbreak mode, then you leave it up to the local individuals, as we said in certain California schools, certain Florida schools, of making a decision based on the judgment of making sure that safety of the children and safety of the teachers are paramount. So you guide the principle, let's try and get them open to the extent that we can, but let's take a look at the dynamics of the infection in the area that's shrinking.
We based our plan off of working close with Health and Human Services with guidance from DPI. Most organizations are following that guidance through the CDC. And the plan that we're proposing is a balance of all of that and following that guidance from the CDC and our Health and Human Services, which I have to say they've been wonderful to work with. and a great guide throughout this process. It's something that we meet with them regularly as local and area superintendents, and all the superintendents in the area we meet weekly as well to keep ourselves abreast of what's happening within our own communities. As I go through this plan, what I'd like to do is go through the entire plan, and I guess I've asked the school board members if you make any notes on the questions or items that you want to come back and discuss. I think that would help the flow of the presentation, and we can come back and discuss any parts of it that you'd like to see modified or proposed to be modified or changed. Our priorities in developing this, again, is the health of our families, of our students, and of our teachers. And I'm going to go ahead because the print, well, it's actually a decent size, but there's a few points that I feel in particular I want to make sure we highlight. But it's important that the families partner with us to monitor the health of our students. If your student has COVID-related symptoms, keep them home. Remote learning days due to illness will not count against students' attendance. One of the primary pillars of our plan and the recommendations from the health department is to make sure that people with symptoms are not in the buildings. We know that asymptomatic spread exists, but it's at a much lower rate than people that have symptoms and spreading that, especially amongst the youth and the young adults. We're going to need our families to partner with us, and we're going to need our teachers as well. Teachers are warriors. We have some that take a lot of pride in. I've worked 20 years and I've never taken a sick day. Well, you've been sick. You chose not to take a sick day. In this situation, we need you to stay home. We're going to have to be strict and tight on that. We'll make every effort to promote health practices and protocols. Physical distancing will be implemented as possible. Face-to-face coverings and nose shields will be encouraged to be worn indoors. We recently had 2 school events. The 8th grade came in for 2 large school events. The 8th graders came in to get trained to do a 6th grade orientation. We had 40 of them attend. Face coverings were presented as encouraged or optional. 37 of the 40 came with face coverings. The other 3 asked for one. They wanted one. They just didn't have access to one. The following day, we had the 6th grade orientation. 140 out of 150 came with face coverings to the event. The other 10 asked for one voluntarily. They wanted one as well indoors. Recommending that when social distancing is not possible and there is a prevalence of COVID in the community, as determined in cooperation with the County Health and Human Services, face coverings and or shields will be required in certain areas in classrooms when that social distancing cannot be obtained. What they consider the social distancing is 6 feet or more, and to not violate that boundary for more than 15 minutes cumulative within a day within a certain individual. We want to have a flexible model. We have choices for families. We always have had choices with the face-to-face instruction, virtual instruction, and also a blended structure. And we'll go through that in a little bit. But we also know that we're going to need families to be flexible as we work with Health and Human Services on the off chance and or potential likelihood that we could have students and or staff who do test positive for COVID, and that we have to implement protocols, potentially quarantine. Hopefully, with our protocols that we'll have in place, that we won't have large outbreaks and that we won't have to take the entire school to remote learning. I am fairly confident that if we're careful and moving forward and make good decisions and reinforce that with the students, that we can have that success. I base that off of the New York YMCA child care with 40,000 students over the programming in COVID did take place. They didn't have a single outbreak in any of the daycare centers. So it can be done. It would be against the odds, but we need to be flexible in case we can. We need to take into consideration the well-being, the social emotional well-being of our students and of our staff and of our families. Kids can't learn if they're not in a good place socially and emotionally. We know that needs to be a focus. We have plans and protocols in place to help address that. We also know that our staff will need supports, and they'll need that programming as well to help them feel supported and get to have their needs met. We also know that the cleaning protocols need to be increased, and the preparation of materials, supplies have been ordered. That's in-house, and the plan is in place to help ramp that up as well. There's 3 instructional models that we may need to move in between in the school year, depending on the level of transmission within our community. And again, this follows local guidelines, recommendations put out by the CDC. And you may see around the country, different school districts have announced which model they're planning to start the school year off. We have the advantage, and sometimes it's hard to remember, starting September 8th, I don't know if there's another school district in the country that starts later than us on a regular schedule. Most of Wisconsin will start September 8th this year. Traditionally, because of the county fair, we never start before Labor Day. So most schools in the country will be reopened before we get to that point. It precipitates their need to announce sooner than us which model they're going into, as they're starting, many of them, in mid-August around the country. But our base plan in that first level, and I'll go through another chart that talks about the COVID rates and the transmission rates in the community and how that will align. But that base model would be a traditional K-12 classroom, face-to-face model with the safety precautions implemented and mitigation factors put into place to help make that as safe as possible in that situation. We plan to have our 6th through 12th grade classes live streamed through like a Zoom meeting. So if we have a student who isn't comfortable attending face-to-face or wakes up and happens to have a headache or a symptom, they'll be able to stay at home, follow their schedule, and attend those classes. So it will, even in that model, give students the option to attend virtually or attend face-to-face. We feel that it'll address the community and parent child care crisis concerns, that will reduce the family burden of teaching and working from home. We know that that was a big stress and a stretch on many families, and especially when we get to 6th grade through 12th grade. Let's be frank, I really was not able to help my kids with math once they got past 8th grade. So having them work with their actual teachers, that's really a benefit to all of them. It offers needed human interactions in a safe environment, utilizes the first weeks of schools to rebuild relationships, review experiences, and then establishes a new normal with those students. I don't want to mislead anybody. This traditional model will still look very different than school looked last year pre-COVID. It just has to if we want to keep the schools open. We have to handle our instructional practices different, and it'll be hard, it'll be a challenge to try to maintain some of those distances and rework how we do things into a model that we know aren't necessarily best instructional practices, but under the current circumstances are. If the transmission rates get to a high level and we're seeing outbreaks within the community, 6th through 12th graders, as they get older, they found that they are more likely to contract the COVID virus, and they're also potentially more likely to spread it as well. So at that grade level, we would switch to a hybrid learning model. That would involve half of the students approximately attending 2 days a week, the other half attending the other 2 days a week, and then alternating that third or having all of them online on that 5th day or that 3rd day. So the students would be attending class every day. It's just some would be virtual or remote, and some would be face-to-face. It allows us to reduce the population in our 2 largest buildings in the school district. The middle school is over 750 students, and the high school is approximately 1,000 students, which makes it difficult in the large shared common spaces to provide that distancing. And it would still provide the needed human interactions, and hopefully for most families, it wouldn't put them in a daycare. The crunch, I realize that some may not be comfortable at those younger middle-aged students staying home by themselves. And I also recognize that some of our high schoolers still aren't responsible at home by themselves. But hopefully, it minimizes that stress on the family. Finally, remote learning would be used when there's significant out-of-control exposure within our community. And working with Health and Human Services, basically they're saying, hey, we really need to implement for an intermittent time period until we get this curve down and get things training in the right way. We need people to work remotely from home. Okay, and even that scenario would look different than what it did last year, as all entities in the state, no one is indicating that there's any motivation, desire, or foresight that there would be a safer at home order like there was last year. And to clarify, despite the Supreme Court ruling, Health and Human Services, they did rule that they still have the authority to mandate these schools go into that moment. So if they felt it was necessary, they could, but all indications are they're not planning to do that. It'll be left to local decision level making. This is the CDC levels of mitigation. No to minimal community transmission would be that traditional with some mitigation. Minimal to moderate community transmission would still be traditional with increased mitigation. We'll change some of our processes that we're doing to potentially reduce any spread. If there's substantial controlled transmission within the community, we'd be looking at the hybrid for the 612 and still the 8.5 face-to-face, but with even more mitigation strategies put into place. And then if there's substantial uncontrolled transmission, we would be looking at remote learning with very limited content. And again, we'll be working with Health and Human Services to determine those levels. And when we work with Health and Human Services, we don't just look at it from a county-wide aspect, we look at it more focused at the school district level. And what are those reports? What's the contact tracing that's going on? Where are we seeing the virus and contagion within our community? And if you go to the county website, you can see a general map of where all the cases have been within the county. And there's two really big hot spots within the county. I can tell you they're not within our California community. So you don't want to base a decision on moving to a more locked down school environment if all the cases or the spike in cases is coming from a large outbreak at a certain facility that may have little to do with us in that point. So the county will be working very closely with us on that, as they have been through the summer. That's our traditional school model for families that they want their kids in the building face-to-face on a regular basis. For families, and we have some who have communicated, I'm just not comfortable going to school on a face-to-face on a regular basis. We want our kids in an online learning environment. They have that choice through the utilization of our Options Virtual Charter School. And I do want to correct, I know in the one email that individuals given the perception that there's not online opportunities for students below 7th grade. I don't know the background behind that, but we have online options available for families all the way down to 4-year-old kindergarten through that program. Not going to lie, if anyone thinks that, hey, I can put my second grader on, just log in, you're good to go, and you don't need to check on them or work with them at all, that's not, no online format is that magical, unfortunately. So any online format will involve a certain level of parent involvement and participation, but we do have that available. And also some parents and families, they like to do a blended learning or that hybrid, where the students have some contact and face-to-face contact and other, both online. They have that choice through the Options Virtual Charter School as well. After the plan is submitted and when we push that out, we'll be surveying parents and giving them information on how to enroll into that program if they would like. So we do anticipate having a certain percentage of our families wanting to participate in that. The school building is under construction, that's St. Patrick's, and so we're in the process of finalizing a lease agreement with Aurora, who purchased the old County Health and Human Services building. So at the start of the school year, the Options Virtual Charter School, we plan to have that housed in the Health and Human Services building out by the Lake Hospital. The College and Career Academy, formerly known as the Alternative High School, is also another option for students in grades 9 through 12. That's been expanded down. If families are wanting a smaller school environment where the class sizes are smaller for those core curriculums, they meet for a few hours a day, and then they can take classes through Gateway. Gateway this fall, the bulk of their classes, they've indicated, will be online. They will have some face-to-face classes for courses such as welding and some of those other technical courses where you need to be in and working on the machines. But they have strong protocols in place. We rent a building from Gateway. It's on their campus. They do have a Gateway campus-wide mask mandate. So if there's somebody out there who doesn't want to wear a face covering, don't enroll in that program. It's a Gateway requirement. PPE considerations, that's the protection equipment for our staff. Face coverings will be provided to all students and staff who want and or need them. We'll also allow students and or staff to wear their own, but we don't want that to be something that they have to spend money out of their own pocket. We will have some guidance in there that face coverings can't be a distraction, similar to dress code, so we don't have people wearing a whole bunch of different words and stuff on the face masks. We'll probably have some guidelines related to here's what's acceptable. We found that when wearing a face covering for staff and wearing a shield, it's hard to protect your voice to a classroom. So we'll be providing all teachers with a voice amplifier system as well if they'd like to use that to save on their voice. Spacing challenges. We have been for years moving to tables for collaborative learning, group learning. It's best practice. Kids learn well when we utilize those strategies. Unfortunately, they don't work well for social distancing strategies. So we measured our classrooms, we've gone throughout the district, and there are some guidelines. Obviously, CDC would like you to get spacing of up to 6 feet. The reality is, and they also recognize that, so long as it's feasible. Most of our classes, we can't get 6 feet. We land somewhere between 3 to 6 feet in those classrooms. So with that known, there's also other equipment that's out there, such as plexiglass dividers on tables to give some protection, but our feeling is the best protection in lieu of a plexiglass shield is an actual shield that students and or staff can wear. That's been shown to block up to 96% of the excrement that comes out when students and or teachers are talking. The nice thing as well is if they turn their head or turn to the side or they get up and walk around, it also has that protection. They're pretty comfortable to wear and they provide a certain level of protection. The CDC has not recognized them as a substitute for the face coverings, but they are a nice alternative, especially if students have any issues breathing or other sensory issues. There's a whole list on the CDC guidance as to why students and or adults should not wear a mask if they meet a certain criteria there. So even if the district were to accept a proposal that required the face coverings or the masks when social distancing can take place, we would need to be sensitive and recognize that there's going to be a number of our students who it's just not practical, they can't do that, they need that on their own. We've also purchased thermal scanners that will be located in each of the buildings. The health department and some of the guidance on temperature checking has pushed towards self-monitoring of it. Over half of the COVID patients never develop a fever, and the recommendation has moved away from doing temperature checks multiple times throughout the day. If they change that and they want us to do those temperature checks, we can do that. We'll have a process in place where a student can self-refer down to the health office to get checked, or these will be located around a building where the student can walk in front of it and they'll tell you what your temperature is and let them know if they should go to the health room at that point. UV filters for the health room, that's where any students who happen to come to school and they end up being symptomatic, they would go. We felt that this was a worthy investment to make, not just because of COVID, but because in any given year when we have a flu outbreak or any virus or sickness, the kids are always trafficking through there. We wanted to make sure that that facility had the best protection possible. The UV filters for the health room are also financially doable in that space because one filter which can cover and handle that room, it sucks the air out, it uses high-powered UV light to kill the virus, and then pushes it back down through. We looked at lots of other filters. Unfortunately, the UV light that's safe for you to be under isn't found to be strong enough to really kill the virus effectively. So this is a solution to help with that. As far as our physical spaces go, we talked about the plexiglass. We will have some in the really high traffic public spaces. We'll have signs and separation stickers all over where that's needed to give that prompt reminder. We have hand hygiene stations, signage. Our initial purchase of sanitizer was 2,000 gallons. We know we'll need approximately 1 gallon per student for the year. So we'll make another order as we get into the school year and we see how much of that's being utilized. If we don't end up using all of it, it's still good for 3 years. So we're not concerned about wasting it. We'll talk about and have signage for the symptoms and then self-checking. And when people are in doubt, we'd rather them be safe and self-refer so they can get assessed on that. The drinking water will be bottle filling only. The drinking fountains will be covered. We'll encourage every student to have their bottle. Obviously, we can't have them sharing bottles. And we'll make sure that we have some one-time cups on hand for those who forget their water bottle or don't have it with them. And I talked about sanitation stations will be around. We have plans for locker usage, creating safe spaces for distancing. And each of our buildings are drilling down and finalizing each of those different strategies within the buildings, even within their departments in some cases. And we'll have a COVID dedicated isolation room where those students get reviewed. And really it's not COVID, it's anyone with COVID related symptoms. They get reviewed, assessed, and to be frank, sent home in as timely manner as possible. And the non-COVID related students will have their needs in all of their different locations. Continuing with healthy environments, the air circulation will be increased to as much as possible and bringing in the fresh air into the buildings. We're increasing the changing of our HVAC filters. Several years ago, we upgraded to the high quality filters that will filter out viruses such as this. So we're just increasing the rotation of those filters. The cleaning and disinfecting, we have daily and weekly protocols that will be increased. Supplies, students will need to not share the supplies. In the past, parents would bring in their school supplies, but mix them all together. Communal supplies, we'll have to keep those separate this year. So we'll have to also make sure that we make efforts for those who either can't provide the supplies or don't have them. Meal spaces, we'll do the best we can to stagger the use, reduce the numbers in those areas. We have increased cleaning protocols again, and teaching about that hand hygiene and good hygiene practices is important. And we'll also have potentially modified building layouts, pedestrian patterns, different drop-off and pickup points. I shouldn't say potentially, we will have those. Those have already been identified. Those will be communicated in routine. Operations, transportation, and working with the bus company, we put in the most feasible protocols that we can. We're going to need to have assigned seats, ask the students from the same household sit together, so that we know where the students are sitting. We will need to still look at that face coverings and work with the health department on that. At the last check, they still were not necessarily recommending in that scenario because of these short rides and cracking the windows to have some fresh air come through, especially in the fall, that face coverings were needed, especially for the younger kids because they have a concern over increased touching. That may change as we move down the road and get those recommendations changed. And or if there's a state mandate or local mandate, but I don't foresee a local mandate coming. Other information in there, the busing will pretty much stay the same. I do anticipate we may have more families wishing to transport their students but for the most part, cleaning will be increased and seating charts, making sure that students are assigned together. And what's referred to as cohorts. You may have heard of cohort groupings. That's what we'll be looking at. Extracurricular activities, we've been following the National Federation of High School Sports, the WELLBEING guidelines, working with our school nurse and our medical advisor to develop a general athletics protocol that is in place. Again, the largest, most critical component is that self-check and that self-assessment. Every day before practice, the coaches will go through the potential symptoms, and again, ask students to dismiss themselves if they're experiencing any of those. That mitigation on the front end is our best strategy. We also have cleaning procedures and distancing working in cohorts. It's not, you can't socially distance in most sports, and we know that, we recognize that, so then we're using cohorting strategies in case there is an exposure that is limiting the number of individuals who be exposed. Human resources specific considerations. This is a great concern to our staff, and we surveyed our staff, and understandably so. There is additional federal leave that pays emergency paid sick leave there's 5 categories that qualify for that leave. It could be someone who's been ordered to quarantine by Health and Human Services, someone in their care has been quarantined and they need to care for them, so there's additional leave available to them, and we as a district are recommending and committing to not paying them just the 2/3 of their salary if they're required to stay at home to care for a kid, but to go ahead and pay the full leave in that instance. And part of the concern that is understandable that arises from the staff is, well, if you're asking me to come into an environment that has a lot of students and I feel like my risk of exposure is increased, I want to make sure that economically, financially, and from a health and wellness standpoint, I'm cared for and looked after. When the qualified leave extends beyond the 2 weeks, employees will be asked to use their available sick time at that point. If they don't have, or if they run out of that sick time, we're proposing that we would provide an additional emergency paid sick leave up to 40 days, which would cover the amount of time needed for someone to reach long-term disability. Hopefully, we never have to get to that point or that anyone has to go through that, but we want to make sure that if we do have a staff member who does become ill and sick from this, that we honor and respect that and we provide that additional protection. Any questions or anything that you'd like me to go back through and discuss?
A question on, I want to make sure I understand that there's certain classes that are going to be Zoom, but that was mainly 6 through 12. Is that correct?
That's correct, at that base level. Now, we talked about, we'll also have the technology available for staff at the elementary level. For instance, as part of that leave, I should clarify, if someone's been quarantined but they're healthy, we'd like to encourage them to work from home and work remotely. So we could have a 2nd grade teacher who has to be quarantined but they're perfectly healthy, where they could log in from home and broadcast to their classroom, where we then could place an adult in the classroom, but the teacher could still lead the instruction from home. The concern was really over the expectation and how realistic it is for like a 2nd grader who has to be quarantined at home to be able to log on and follow along the schedule, within that classroom environment, and the ability of our staff to manage that dual classroom, because really you're dealing with 2 classrooms in that scenario. But if we have teachers, I can see 4th and 5th grade teachers potentially doing that. If we have teachers that want to look at that, I think all strategies are on the table, and that's something we can also.
So the district will be flexible in that case.
Yeah.
Maybe that student's family will switch that particular student over to options, especially depending on their own circumstances.
Yeah, we don't have we do district transfers all throughout the year. And so we could see somebody selecting a certain model and, not liking it and not working out, it doesn't mean that they're locked into that model for the entire student.
The next question had to deal with congestion, and we talked about when meals are served. I don't want to get into all the intricate details, but there's some general concepts of what we're going to do at different schools. How it's like when we serve at high school, for example. Sure you can get some thoughts. Probably you want to share that with the group.
Yeah, let me pull up. Yeah, I was thinking which side we could have in those questions or not, and not on my head.
Yeah. Based on like searching that we have on the
Amy, if you're gonna comment, the viewers at home can't hear you, I just told these are, well, we're getting the mic to Amy. We'll be eliminating the self-service. Doesn't mean that salad bar will necessarily go away, but we can't have self-service where there's the sharing of batons and the utensils. We'll be maximizing spacing between students, utilizing all the tables in the cafeteria. I can tell you at the high school level in particular, the kids for some time have been able to go and eat anywhere. We'll encourage that spacing to get their food and go, you know, to a different spot in the building to eat that. That'll be facilitated by utilizing disposable trays, disposable utensils. And also, we'll be looking at, and furniture at the high school is very dynamic, but they'll be removing, when possible, some of the chairs to kind of limit the seating at certain tables to manage that. At the elementary school, do you want to speak to that, Amy?
Sure, I'm happy to speak to the elementary. We have one grade level at a time that will be in the cafeteria, and the other grade level will then be rotating into the classroom, which for the students will be exciting, perhaps for the first couple of rotations. We will anchor our kindergarten students at all times in the cafeteria, and we've worked with Ellen Leisure, our food service director, to make sure that we have stacked lunches, easy to carry lunches for the first few days as we learn how to maneuver with the disposable trays back and forth to the classroom. There are days that our elementary students do eat in the classroom, and that's a special experience, perhaps you know, a little reward that they worked at earning, and that's a kind of an exciting experience. So we know that they are capable of carrying trays to the classroom, and because they're disposable, there is not a return trip back. And so that will cut down on that. And of course, that will be staggered and supervised, and you know, we won't be crowding those students as they're moving around the hallway. I just, Ed, wanted to go back to your previous question about you know, how we may be addressing those needs at the elementary. We may have students who do need to quarantine or are homesick for 10 to 14 days. While, you know, parents can explore perhaps moving to a virtual system, I want to reassure everyone that we can meet those needs of an absent student by keeping them enrolled in the regular elementary schools as well. The teachers will be, if not streaming, videotaping those core lessons a day, and then adding those into a lesson plan kind of tailored like we did during the virtual learning, so families can then access that with their students. They will also communicate to families who may have that capability of streaming into the classroom and watching some of the live lessons. But we also know that some children may be at a babysitter's house or another place where they can't have access to that classroom, or know that it's 10 o'clock and maybe I should log into my computer now and see the math lesson. So we're trying to be really flexible with that, but I want to assure parents that if your student has to be home for a period of time, we will continue to help them progress through the curriculum and still have those touch points while they are home.
Yes. Thank you, Amy, for clarifying. I would also add what Amy outlined, like in that school lunch scenario. To give an example, I talked about if there's increasing transmission and or outbreaks within the school, stepping up our mitigation levels would be perhaps all students eat within their classroom now and meals are delivered. So that's not what Amy described as our base level. We're not painting ourselves in a corner on that next step in mitigation, but we know that there's other potential ideas, recommendations, and we work with the health department based on what is the scenario that we're dealing with, and then making changes accordingly.
Could you explain how you reached that, you determine that threshold?
Yeah, so I'm working on the county currently on finalizing that. They have their dashboard that I think many people are familiar with. So it's a combination of putting together a rubric and looking at that, and then combining that with information in regards to what's happening within our school community. So it's, you know, some of the county dashboard is what they utilize. So for example, and I don't have it in front of me, Kevin, it's not finalized yet, but they're looking at, okay, if we have 2 reds, then off the top of my head, they're looking at that substantial controlled transmission, depending on that factor where it is. So it's, while we're developing that rubric as to what it would look like, they also want to preface it that we could be too reds because a certain plant had a big outbreak with 100 cases and we threw our metrics wrong. And you may not want to consider that a substantial uncontrolled transmission for 3 months. So it's using practical common sense applied with some of those metrics that we have.
Just being able to point to where the metric is instead of saying moderate.
I agree, and working on finalizing that with them. Yeah. But even when that is finalized, we'll still use common sense. Is that what it looks like within your community? So I wouldn't want to give someone, once that rubric's done, the impression that, hey, wait a second, we've got 3 yellows and a red, we're at this level, because it still requires that checking. Where is that? Other thoughts or questions?
Can you pull up a slide on her recommendation on if a staff gets, that person gets sick and
Yeah. Okay, this will be shared with all families as well. The county put together a chart of the isolation procedures. This was something that we were working with them on what is going to be their isolation procedures. I can tell you, since we started working on this, those procedures did change because the CDC changed their recommendations as well. And anywhere on this chart where you see 72 hours, it's now 24 hours based on the CDC recommendation. So the county is following the CDC isolation procedures and modifying them as they come about. There's a number of different scenarios, and we felt this chart is difficult to read and interpret. It lays it out really nicely, but you need to reread it a few times. So we felt it was easier to break it out into the different scenarios that they listed. So the first scenario, let's say it could be a staff member or it could be a student, that they're contacted and notified, and anybody who is a known contact that they have an exposure to positive testing COVID individual, they would receive a notice that you've been exposed and the exposure took place on this date. Have you had contact with that person since then? And depending on when that last contact is, they would then require you to be on 14 days of quarantine from that last contact. So if a staff member or a student were to be exposed, and it was determined, and exposed means within 6 feet for 15 minutes or longer, and in particular without a face covering or a face shield, then they're likely going to consider you exposed and you'll be in quarantine for 14 days from that contact point. If you've had close contact with someone who's tested positive for COVID and you live with them but can avoid further close contact, it's the exact same situation. So this is, my spouse gets COVID and goes to the spare bedroom, or we lock them in the basement, we just give them food 3 times a day, and I no longer have contact with them. It's 14 days from that point of when they're considered over the COVID virus, or from that point of the contact, you can return regardless of what their health situation is. But if 7 days in, you go and have contact with that person, you're quarantined, and you start over. So in this situation, scenario 3, you're under quarantine because someone you live with is tested positive for COVID. You've had additional close contact with a person who is sick while in quarantine. You'll need to restart the quarantine from the last day you had close contact with that individual. So maybe you put a distance at first, but then you guys figured things out, and now you were able to distance. The 14 days starts from that point. In this scenario, you're a parent or a caregiver and someone within your household is sick. You're providing that direct care to the person. Your 14 days do not start until that person has cleared the protocols to be considered okay to return to work or to school and no longer contagious. However, does not require a negative test. There's certain criteria. You need to be symptom fever-free for 24 hours without the aid of medication, and your symptoms need to be substantially reduced if you have any symptoms at the time. Scenario 4, go through that. Scenario 5, and this is probably the most likely challenge that we're going to face, especially knowing that 90+ % of the people right now getting tested for COVID in Wisconsin in our area don't have COVID, they have something else, making the assumption that the majority of them have symptoms of some type, because our county numbers for asymptomatic lab positive tests are just around 11 or 12%. So that means that those who are testing positive, 88% of them roughly have a symptom. So this is someone experiencing COVID symptoms but have had no known contact or exposure with someone who's tested positive for COVID. You should avoid contact with others outside the home and quarantine for at least 10 days since symptoms first appeared, and at least 24 hours fever-free without the use of fever-reducing medication. This is the same protocol whether you were tested for COVID and tested positive or not. So someone who tests positive for COVID, if they recover and meet that protocol, they could be back to school or work within 10 days. But someone exposed would have to stay out 14 days because they could develop symptoms up to 14 days after their exposure.
Thanks for going over those scenarios. Could you go back to slide 15 where it talks about what we're suggesting with respect to staff and their usage of their sick time and what our commitment to them would be? This is something that this is the first time we've seen it as a group, so I think it's a very important topic. And I wanted, a typical employee sick time, I guess it makes a lot of difference if they're new. Say they've been with us for 2 years, how much sick time would they commonly accrue in a 2-year period?
The maximum potential would be 20 days. They receive 10 days of sick leave a year. Then we have this PTO 2 or 3 days, but 10 days a year is for our typical professional staff.
To 40 days?
No, they can make that to, is it 80 days? We have some people who are grandfathered in who have more than that. So I would say, but the typical, if I was to say what the typical staff member is going to depend on their age, their family, kids at home. I can share that, my spouse started in the new district, where she started that base. And, between having 5 kids and kids getting sick and knocked out that way, we feel pretty fortunate she's able to make 5 by the end of the year.
Thank you.
Just looking at that and just...
I did receive one suggestion. Oh, sorry, Paul, can you...
Yeah, just looking for consistency and clarification. So I've been working in the district for 25 years and I've got 100 sick days. If I get and have to use that extension, I have to use my sick days. However, if a new employee is there, it goes to the up to 40 covered days by the district, and it doesn't impact. It seems like it's a double thing. I get hit and use my sick days that I've accumulated, and the other one doesn't have accumulation, but they still get full pay and no detrimental impact on them. And I think your veteran teachers are going to be looking at all the concerns I expressed with the letter. That one's going to really destroy morale as well.
Oh, I think the point you're making is very valid. I did have a suggestion from a staff member late this afternoon. I didn't have a chance to talk to Bill or Shannon about it. That I would share that I think makes sense, and that would be putting a cap on that sick leave, and perhaps we know everybody starts with 10 days. Perhaps they utilize the 10 days and then go into that leave. And then those who have more than 10 days could utilize it if needed after the 40 days of additional time. At least that would be the only way, we could assure that everybody would have a maximum or an equitable impact on it. Because
Yep,
I think your point about somebody who's been a veteran, who's been relatively healthy would potentially end up using a lot more sick leave.
Right, and I think that's a valid point that you expressed there. And if it would go over the 40 days and they had sick days, then I could see tapping into them. But I wouldn't see front loading them if the others aren't being front loaded as well. So just something to consider.
I agree with Paul. I think we should start our 40 days right after the 2 weeks. Their sick time is their sick time. This is a special circumstance, and I think by not tapping into their sick time right away, I know we asked for your recommendation for that at the last meeting, but I hadn't seen it up here. I think it's better to make that commitment to the staff 40 days right after the 2 weeks, and then their sick time would kick in, unfortunately, if they're still left for 40 days. But that would be our commitment, that incident and that 40 days. If they didn't have sick leave. Right. They didn't have sick leave.
Because we're covering the extra 1/3 of the salary for the first 2 weeks that they're out, correct?
The federal leave just requires you to provide that additional 2 weeks, and if it's caring for a child or someone that you give care to, they only require you to cover 2/3. We would be covering the full amount. Yeah. And what I'm hearing though from Paul and Ed, is there anyone that would have concerns if we move bullet point 2 to bullet point 3, meaning the sick leave would kick in after the federal time and the basically what we refer to as COVID leave last year would be exhausted? And then it would go into the sick leave?
I was just going to ask that.
We use the additional time needed for an employee to get the long-term disability. We cover that gap.
Not to get to your sick.
To get the long-term disability. So if someone were to get sick and be out that long, that it would get them to that point to qualify for long-term disability. Based off of the impression from the school board that we wanted some parameters on that, and keeping in mind that those who can work remotely from home won't be required to take any leave. They're working remotely from home. So this would really apply to those who are too sick or unable to work from home, or those who their job or position, there really isn't anything we can have them do.
And then this would also extend to staff as well, not just teachers, like a custodian or something like that, correct?
Correct.
Okay. Yeah, because I think that's another differentiation that has to be addressed and reaffirmed with them.
Yeah, this would be for all staff.
Okay.
And they are required to provide documentation. They can't just say, well, I'm taking care of someone sick at home. They have to have documentation.
The health departments give them letters. There's 5 criteria that you have to have to qualify for the federal, and we would stick to that same criteria. If we don't stick to that criteria, we open ourselves up to discrimination suits if we take it on a case-by-case basis. So legal strongly recommends following the disability leave and the criteria outlining those leave provisions.
The vast majority of people would probably fall from the 2 weeks. We know that. Generally speaking, healthy people recover. I'm sorry. We know that generally speaking, the vast majority of people who might be infected with COVID-19 or just have to quarantine because of COVID-19 would be taken over, which is part of the federal government reimbursement. And the two-thirds point, like Jason says, it's very specific to only if you're caring for someone else, it doesn't affect you. It's not you personally. If you're caring for someone else, so that wouldn't affect every case. So when we get to the 40 days, it would be relatively rare. Assuming they're Jason.
Right. But I'm hearing, I know there's It's a little wonky how we have to go through this process because it's like one great big motion in a sense. So are there any objections to this little micro change within that larger motion and plan? All right. What I'll do for now is I'll just pump it down here. We'll make a note. We have it recorded. And I think that would address the concern of the equity depending on the longevity. But we can make that change in our.
Well, and I just want to acknowledge though that after tonight we vote on and approve whatever plan we approve, it's going to be available for public to review.
Mm-hmm.
And then there's approximately 2 weeks before our next meeting. So if we miss something or there's something that is really bothering someone, we encourage them to contact us because this is going to be possibly changed every board meeting, because it's so fluid. And I think that the public should understand that this isn't a done thing for us. This is something we take very seriously, and we're going to continue to evaluate as we live through this.
Absolutely. Other questions or areas to review? Thank you for bringing that up, Paul and Ed.
Yeah. Just for discussion, I know everybody has different perspectives and views on this, and those letters you read beginning of the meeting show that. But I think as a district, the biggest thing is we need to control the environment as best we can, and all teachers, students must be protected first and foremost. And I know that there's a resistance for face masks and shields and all those things, but knowing that we cannot assure social distancing, I really am pushing that we mandate that either they have a cloth face mask or a shield. And I'll go 6 through 12 because I know that the elementary school and the teachers at the elementary school are not as concerned, I guess I would say, as the young teenagers and older teenagers. But I think we have to really know that there's a lot of comorbid conditions out there amongst our faculty and our student population, and not knowing what exposure children have in their home and bringing them into our environment and then going back into the homes, our staff and our people. I think we have to take the utmost precaution on that. And I would really, really, really push for it is mandated. And let's habits are hard to break, good or bad. Let's instill good habits because as we look at it, Racine is putting in mandatory. All the tech schools are putting in mandatory. All the universities are putting in mandatory. If we're preparing them for the future, I think the future is here. So I know that won't set well with all the population, but some of the parents I've also had is if it's not there, they're not sending their kids to Elkhorn. And I know there's others that are probably on the other side of the board too, but I being compromised myself, I think we need to control that environment to the greatest extent that we possibly can.
And Paul, what would you expect of our special ed and medical students that can't handle that?
I would look at the face shields, whether they're wearing it on a hat or the collar one or something like that, but try to get that adapted to them, knowing that it's not about me to you, it's you to me. I know there's not an answer that covers it all, but I think we have to do what's best for the greater majority of the environment we're trying to control.
In speaking to Jenny's comment in that I included in this presentation a hyperlink to face coverings and what the CDC guidance is on that. They recommend that there's a whole list of exceptions for students that we need to accommodate for that.
So how do parents do that? Is it kids that have a 504 plan? They have an IEP? I mean,
I would not recommend that we get that formal in the requirements on that plan. I think it's a conversation with the family and the students. If we were to have the mandate and the kid isn't comfortable, I would hope that the teacher needs to be able to react in the class. If you see a kid's uncomfortable and not breathing, they, not being able to breathe well and struggling with that, then have them take it off and take a break. But we need to be more responsive than the process of going to a 504 or not in doing that.
so would we require medical notes? At what point?
I would not want to require families to incur the medical expense of that, but I guess that's, if the board wanted to have such a mandate and we wanted that, well, I think it's just working informally with the families and having those conversations. I don't think we would need to get that formal with it. Now, does that mean that we could have someone who just adamantly there's really no health issue and the kid could wear it perfectly fine and they just want to say that, yeah, my kid can't breathe with it on? That's certainly a potential there. We could always reassess that. I'm fairly confident, though, with just that encouragement. And to be frank, for those who I know feel strongly against the face coverings out there, we surveyed our staff and had over 250 responses. And I have a lot of staff who they are scared about their own health, their own safety, about their child or their loved one with comorbidities or who have immuno issues, that they are scared to the point where they don't know if they can come back to work if we don't have certain measures in place. That's why when I wrote this recommendation there, it would allow us to be nimble and flexible, yet require it in accordance with CDC when we can social distance, and or if we have a teacher with comorbidities or concerns that are valid, that we can then work with the families. You know what, if you happen to be a third grader or a fourth grader and that doesn't work for you, but we have this teacher that has a health concern, we can look at reassigning the students to a different class. And so I think just being pragmatic and working on that base level is what I would recommend if the board does want to go with that approach on having a mandate. And if it is abused or out of control, then I think we could always revisit that. As Mr. Sparrow indicated, this is a living, breathing document. We can always adjust if needed. If the infection rates drop in the community, they get to a minimal level, then we can look at reducing that or eliminating or making adjust options. Whatever we do going into the year, there's going to be an end point at some point. Knock on wood. I don't know if it's going to be 30 years or a year or two, but we will have an exit point, and I am confident that things will come around. So I think working with the Health and Human Services is important so that we can take that into consideration. But I feel strongly if we were to have that as a requirement, even like I indicated in there, we need to grant the flexibility that the CDC is also recommended within that recommendation.
Just to be clear, Jason, the Warren County Health and Human Services does not either encourage or discourage.
They changed that. Previously, their stance was we neither encourage nor discourage, but as the CDC recommendations changed, I've received emails from people, there's no research that shows it. I'm sorry, go to the CDC website, you can look at 23 studies or more that show that. Unfortunately, I don't like wearing a mask either, I get it. But unfortunately, the evidence is overwhelming that it has an impact. And it is there, it's getting clearer and clearer. So that is there. The county has changed their stance to that they encourage now rather than either encourage nor discourage. And all of this may be a moot point at some point if the state looks to implement. But I will say they've kind of taken a stance, and at least the last interview I saw with the leading epidemiologist, he was very strong against mask or face covering mandates because he felt you had more compliance when it was optional. What we saw with our two events at the middle school, we had 100% compliance after it was offered and given to them as choice. If it was mandated on principle, we may have had some who just said, I'm not doing it. So I know I suspect that's where some of the state level hesitancy is from, is that philosophically they need to believe that you have more adherence from not doing a mandate. But you can see more and more schools adopting that. In our local county, Bigfoot and Lake Geneva have recommended how do we put it, for lack of a better term, a mandate or a recommendation or a plan as I've outlined, where when social distancing is impossible, you're going to be asked to wear, the face covering. Williams Bay, last I heard, and I don't know if they're going to stay with that or not, they haven't approved, but they're looking at doing a full requirement of the face covering while indoors.
612.
612? Okay. 612. So,
are they going right to the cohort?
are they going what?
Are they going right to the cohort systems?
Burlington they're using the hybrid model for their middle school and high school. They have a construction project going on. They're utilizing, I don't know, and I don't like to speak about the other models. He is in our work group, but I don't know if their numbers actually get reduced in the building, because I believe they're all attending at the high school. I could be wrong, I'll have to double check, so that they could open up the middle school portion that's available for more elementary grades.
Burlington is doing where they have 7 through 12 in high school, and half the kids come 2 days a week. The other half come the other 2, and then 1 day is for cleaning.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah, so they're combining the 7 through 12 into the one building.
Yep, the class sizes are cut in half. They have cohorts that they come.
So they're already to like our next level.
Yes,
Pretty much.
they would be starting at that, yeah. In our conference, they're the only ones starting at that level. If we go more east, Union Grove is looking at a face covering mandate. Wilmot and Central Scotia still haven't decided at our last meeting. This week we may have a finalization on that. But they're union high schools with older kids. They were also leaning towards requiring the face coverings at a minimum when social distancing is possible.
Jason, I feel like it's important to lay some facts out there with regard to the transmission rate of children with the disease and the death rate. Because it's significantly different than it is in adults. I'm looking at the study published by the Journal of Pediatrics, and they have concluded in this article that children infrequently transmit COVID-19 to each other or to adults. And there's all kinds of, I'm happy to forward a link to that article to you. In another report that was done as of Saturday, 36 children in the entire United States under the age of 15 have died from COVID, which is 0.03% of all corona deaths at the time. And I looked at the statistics on children dying from the flu, and in 2019, 511 students died from flu in all of 2019. So if you double the number of 36, you get 72. For 72 children die in 2020. You have 37 times more likely to die of the flu than you do of COVID. Our goal is to protect our children from dying, not from getting sick. If we want to keep our kids from getting sick, we should never send them to school.
But one of the concerns I will put there is you can't always go to death.
Hang on, Walsh, you're still talking.
Oh.
I'm all for protecting our children and our, our teachers and our staff. I think both need to be protected. But do I feel like a mask mandate is going to prevent deaths? No, I do not. May it keep some adults from getting sick? Maybe a few. But that's my position, and that's, I just felt like the statistics and the facts surrounding how this virus affects children, and the fact that the Pediatric Association is coming out and saying it is rare for children to not only get it, but to pass it on, and extremely rare for them to die from it.
Right, and I think your points, Julie, are very valid and are reflected in the CDC's most recent recommendations, where they reinforced again that students should be in school, that it is very unlikely for that to happen and take place. Yeah, we do know that that does go up for the adults, but everything you said has been communicated and reiterated by the CDC as well. So I appreciate you sharing that. Paul, you had a comment?
Yeah, and I appreciate that study and all the numbers and statistics and things like that too. But the thing that we're focusing on there is death. And one of the things with this COVID that we have to look at is long term. They're looking at the permanent damage that goes to the heart, the lungs, and the body. So you may not die, but like me, as you age, it caught up to you, and now you're in bad shape. And I think that reinforces that we need to control the environment as close and tight as possible. And hopefully no one ever dies, but even more so, hopefully nobody has any long-term health implications because of exposure that may have been able to be controlled.
What study is that called?
Excuse me, I didn't hear.
What study are you referencing? The long-term
I would have to look up, but off the top of my head, I can't tell you exactly what it is, but there's studies on everything there, but the long-term health implications are the question right now. It's an unknown answer, but they are finding that health on heart and lungs after being exposed are compromised.
I would agree that there's a possibility of organ damage from COVID-19. But I would also say that there's probably a possibility of organ damage from a number of diseases. For instance, my sister-in-law is an RN. She got strep throat last winter, and it spread. She didn't go to the doctor soon enough, it spread, and it ate a hole in her lung, at which point she is recovering from that. So, but that's just strep throat. So I mean, I agree there's probably a lot of unknowns with COVID-19 with regard to organ damage, but I think there are also a lot of other diseases that cause organ damage.
So I think I did a good job of basically picking a sub-motion or protocol that none of the board would support, or depending on which side. Some of you may feel it doesn't go far enough, some of you may feel it goes too far. So I guess what I'd like is there a proposal to change of the language or thoughts on the language as is that you would like to see? So we can discuss that specifically.
Not to interrupt you, but during our conversations, we brought up the concept of like a mask system. And that's a detail, but in your present language, it allows for certain areas of classrooms to be what we refer to as mask rooms, where it's mandatory. Where for you to be in that classroom or in that activity, you need to wear a mask. And I think that's where I personally think we need to land, because you mandate it, it just sends the wrong message. I mean, I work for an employer that's mandated mask wearing, and these are large factories that I visit. Is everybody wearing it and it's mandated? No. It's just the people that made a choice to make a wise decision for themselves and others that wear them. So it's really a personal choice here, but they mandated it because that was their position. Here at the district, I don't think mandating anything gets anything done. We're not going to have mass police walking the halls. It's not how we're not. So the point of it is, if we have certain areas where we know it's required because of the circumstances, it could be the teacher that's a health risk, and in order for her to be here, or he or she wants to be here, that's what they would require. And I would support that type of activity in our district. But to mandate it, I'm just not in favor.
So, Ed, are you saying that the way that's worded, you are in agreement with, or?
Yeah, but I want to point out that what that's talking about is in the details of the rest of this 40-some page PowerPoint and all the things it's linked to is there. We do have discussions about mask zones, and we're going to have language about what would it take to implement that in a classroom, or if we've got a lab situation where you got to be close to the person to help them be educated on what they're doing. I'm in favor of mandating that because I want to protect both those individuals.
Other thoughts on the language as proposed?
I think it's right now in certain areas, classrooms. And the discussion 2 weeks ago was zoning. I mean, the kids know that they're changing classrooms and they're on the hallway in this high congestion area. They may be asked to put one up. If they're in a tech room and they're with an instructor and they're being shown how to do something, they may be asked to put one up. I personally do not want our teachers to be police officers, you know, having to discipline 24/7. Is it going to be frustrating either way? Absolutely. Mandated, it's frustrating. If it's recommended, it's frustrating. There's not going to be any easy solution. But I mean, I've got 3 kids. If I mandated it, they're all free to do something different. And I can't imagine being a teacher in that circumstance, or a parent for that matter. I think the language needs to stay.
Because it's allows it to be flexible enough.
I like the idea that we're going to be fluid in the fact that we may be hybrid 1 week, we may be face-to-face the next week, and nobody has a crystal ball, and we don't know what the future's going to hold. But right now, as it stands, the most important thing is we need to keep our school.
And I do think this language allows us to put, measures or precautions in place where we can also protect our staff, because if I don't have staff in the building, we can't have the kids in. And we don't have, we already know that, every year we have a sub shortage. And this year, we know about 20% of our subs have indicated they're not going to come back because of the circumstance. A lot of our subs are retirees. We have we're very pleasantly surprised, 44% saying, yep, they plan on coming back and they're excited. And then about the remaining saying, we're waiting to see what the plan and the precautions in place are. So I do think that I try to strike a balance knowing the sentiment and the feelings of the community and the board, but also putting in the necessary protections for the scenarios where we need that for our staff and their well-being as well.
Jason, I'm struggling with the word prevalence. What does that word mean? And there is a prevalence of COVID in the community. I mean, is 40 cases, 45 cases, what's been, we all know that spikes on Monday because of the testing over the weekend, and then by Wednesday, those numbers are always right around that 40, 45 number. That's the way it's been the last month. What does prevalence mean?
So the prevalence, I look at 2 factors. We're looking at the infection rate, and then they're looking at the number of cases. Right now, because our number of cases, are within, they really look at what's their capacity to handle the cases and handle the number of sick people. The prevalence level, if I were to, pick like today, for example, they would say it's around the moderate level because the infection rate is about 5%. and the number of new cases is around that mid-40s. It always spikes on Monday, just the cycle on when the tests come in is what I've noticed. But we go to one more metric on that is, okay, of those 41 cases, how many are within our California community? Okay. So that's why I can't give you a specific right now. I've seen some charts, we could develop them, but I think it gets to where you're pinning yourself into a decision where it may not be the most rational, but that's what the matrix says, so therefore we do it. But, so right now, Health and Human Services and talking to them would probably pin us at moderate, which would be a prevalence, but I would need to go that step further is, okay, what is it within our zip codes, so to speak, to make that final confirmation.
Yeah, by the Walworth County's own website and admission, I'm looking at it right now, it's showing the number of negative tests, and then it has an asterisk from DHS COVID-19 website, and then if you look at what that says, it says data for this metric is incomplete and will be updated as soon as it becomes available. Well, guess what? That means that they haven't released the negative numbers. And I got an email from Senator Nass on Friday indicating that there are counties specifically holding their negative tests for several weeks and not releasing those numbers to skew the percentage of positive cases. So by Walworth County's own admission, those negative test numbers are not accurate. It's probably higher than what they're actually showing. So I would really make sure that when we're talking with the Walworth County Department of Health and Human Services, that we really are narrowing that down to what's active in our school district.
Absolutely. And I would say in getting our counties back, they definitely want those processed in the end as soon as they can. I don't have any indications from them whatsoever that they would have any desire to hold that, because they want that infection rate percentage down. And how that comes down is by having the accurate reflection of what the negative tests are. Kevin, do you have any thoughts that you want to share?
I just want to know more about the matrix that you're using, because you have sole discretionary power, according to. But that's a tough one. I want to know what's going into it before you make the decision.
And I understand that. It's not finalized yet, and I can, put that together, but yeah, and that's something I need to work more on the county, and the delay on that is I'm asking them to take their matrix and align it with the CDC's matrix for that recommendation. So we're pretty close to that. But again, even at that point, it's going to be those individual conversations with them, not just the matrix, but it's going to be, okay, the matrix says that the way we need to talk. Because it may not be that bad. It may be worse. Hopefully it's always not as bad.
Let's get off the mask issue. But some of the other measures that we can put in place, you mentioned temperature checks, doing multiple of those a day, no longer the recommendation. We did talk about having temperature checks when adults come into the schools, especially our elementary schools that are present to family visitors and volunteers.
Yeah, so we have the first standard that will be in the front office when we check in, have them check their temperatures. We're really minimizing the inside adults that are coming into the building and all the parents. At least initially, we're not going to be allowed to walk down, pick up the kids, or we'll call the kids down, but they're not going to be in the front doors.
We won't be asking parents to come and read to our kids.
Well, we have our volunteer list, and they'll be more like, almost like they'll be called and asked in, but we probably will have less volunteers within the building, because that's one of the practices that are really should minimizes the number of adult contacts from outside.
I'm less worried about the numbers right? That's where teachers versus adults with calls.
Right.
And adults can utilize masks and wear masks and sustainability do a temperature check.
So initially, we were looking at no volunteers, and then we said, well, now maybe we want to reconsider this, because if we're having staff that are out in quarantine, we may want, we're going to need volunteers, but we're going to have to be judicious in how we use them, and so.
We have them fill out like a questionnaire that asks health questions, or health questions.
There's a screening tool that has the checklist of the questionnaires, yeah. We're not, right now it's not recommended to make it rid of it but we're looking at sending that out as the reminders to check that and review that. For our athletics, the coaches are supposed to review that before each practice needs to, check that out.
Going back to the statement here on face coverings, are we going to, is this going to be blanket for 4K through 12? Or are we looking at this specifically for high school only, or are we, where are we drawing the line there?
As of right now, this is blanket and ordering, again, the shields for all students, because at the elementary level, again, the way our seating set up, we can't socially distance them. So I envision that shields, there's different models where in some you can put the hat, we have a visor format, go around the neck, more like a necklace. But as it's stated right now, and because the Association of Pediatricians changed their recommendation, we would do that as extending now to make sure that we have that. At least they are protected. We don't have that issue.
Everybody has said everything I'm talking about. So that's why I'm just sitting here being quiet. But I have a job where I have to meet people, bam. Somewhere masks. I may be wearing a shield. I won't be wearing a mask. I'm in that age group. I'm not the perfect candidate. I'm in that age group, but I have to go on. And hopefully, I'm amazed at how many times I do go to the grocery store and we all have masks. We're all trying to not spread the disease and keep healthy ourselves. We're going to have some that aren't, but even if we mandate it, we've seen people have temper tantrums. We don't need that for our children. Encouraging them to get across, let's stay healthy. We've been doing it with programs for fitness. Kid doesn't like to run. Well, we've got kids that are running that never ran before. It's that whole atmosphere of working together, which I think this district has done great. And if you're not comfortable sending your kids to school, and I totally understand that, we have those other programs in place. And we haven't just come up with. We've had these programs in place for 5 years, 6 years. I'm not even sure how long it's been so long anymore. Time flies. And we also, last spring, at the drop of a hat, we did virtual school for everyone. We took a couple days off there. Administrators, staff figured it out. They did a fantastic job. Not every kid learns the best that way. So some kids need that face-to-face. Some kids need that social interaction. This is kind of the best of both worlds, is what I see this plan as. So, like the one woman in the letter stated that she had some misinformation. We need to try to reach out to those parents when they have misinformation. And that's what I would ask that staff do, that administrators do, staff do. It's never going to be a perfect world.
I'm struggling with will be required. I'd like to see that change to maybe required.
Where's it
Or
at?
in, yeah, maybe, or,
But we talked about the labs, where it's gonna be in. That's why that's in there.
Some places, we have to, understand. Food service might be one. Where,
I guess, yeah.
Well, May still does leave that flexibility that if I'm working out in mechanics lab and I have to sit under a car with someone else for a certain amount of time,
Right.
well, we require that fulfill, the word may does allow that flexibility.
The
So,
definition is 15 minutes. And
6 feet 50.
right.
Which hallway congestion doesn't
take
take
15
15 minutes.
minutes. Should it take 15?
Well, they don't have that.
They have 2.5 minutes.
It's a cumulative of 15 minutes, but
No, but it's,
3 minutes.
I'm sorry, I'm on Bill's account. I can change that to me on my own, but I'll have to log in later. So we can make a note to modify that to May. You're right on, it's a cumulative of 15 minutes, so it's unlikely that someone would get contact trace from hall passing time unless it's a boyfriend and girlfriend walking side by side.
And they're getting it.
Yes,
Yeah.
you're right.
Exactly. That's happening.
But it's not likely to occur during the time. Someone dropping in the face might be likely, but yeah, the social distancing may be traced.
Well, as we look at it, I think just like a dog on a leash, it's hard to retract them once they're at the end. I would like to see it as tight as possible, and we can always loosen up, opposed to try to tighten it up later.
Could you repeat that, Paul, a little closer to the mic?
It's kind of like a dog on a leash. It's hard to retract them once they're at the end. It's easier to keep them close to you and then loosen it out. I would like to see us keep it as tight as possible early, and as we move forward, we can always loosen those requirements. But once you are loose, it's pretty hard to tighten them back up. So I would like to see it, especially with the social distancing being compromised in most arenas of our school. At least the middle school and high school would be required usage of them, guaranteed, mandated when social distancing cannot be had. And then talking with the elementary schools, I understand theirs, and they don't seem as concerned. And the research shows that the younger children aren't as prevalent in transferring it. So I guess we could be looser there, but I definitely believe middle school, high school, without the social distancing, we start really tight and we can loosen it up if it shows that it's available. Comes back to needing to control the environment as best we can. And we want to be consistent so that we don't get, because we know how teenagers are, having worked in the school for 30 plus years, Mr. Brown doesn't make us do that, Mr. Martell does, and then it's a battle of trying to prove something. When there's nothing to prove, we take that battle out of the field.
Mr. Brown's on this meeting, Mr. Martell.
I know, that's why and he's also very loose because he likes to be liked. So he's right, Mr. Brown?
So if it were, so Paul, are you saying that if that was listed as May, you would not be in favor of the potential motion? Or would you be okay with May?
No, I'm not going to be okay with May. If we cannot mandate, if social distancing is not guaranteed, I can't support it. For middle school, high school.
What does that mean for athletics then? You're not going to guarantee social distancing in any of our athletics or co-curriculars.
I think, well, I don't want to speak for Paul, but the CDC, if you're following the CDC recommendations, they don't recommend it for even when they're putting it out there that all kids should wear in public spaces, except for PE, except for athletics. There's a pretty lengthy list of.
They do, and they say they don't need them for PE.
Right.
And WASB has a teleconference tomorrow, and theirs is, they also are supporting the mandating of face shields or masks in close proximities.
No, face shields are not recommended by the CDC. Yeah, not at all. No face shield is recommended whatsoever. It has to be a cloth mask.
Well, they're saying cloth masks, but they're also looking at for special considerations, the asthmatics and the medical and things like that.
But no shields.
Correct, that's not a CDC recommendation.
And I don't know if we're going to reach a complete consensus on all this stuff. Is there anyone that shares Paul's? I said I
Sorry.
don't know.
We got all of it until the last
I don't know
second.
I don't know if that thing's on. What I was saying is, I don't know that we're going to reach a complete consensus on everything. Is there anyone else that supports the position that Paul has put forward?
No.
I do not.
So I'm not seeing any, so it would be difficult to build a consensus on that. So I think we should probably move on in the interest of.
Is there, I guess I'd like, is there consensus around utilizing the same wording, but utilizing the word may? And or how would someone like to see that modified or changed?
I guess I would like it modified. I think it gives her word may. I don't want to see our special education students or some of our higher need students that really need to be in the classroom single down, because it's every day the teachers will, I mean, and it's not just the teachers, but there's going to be students that will not come back if it's mandated. And I think that needs to be okay, and it needs to be a safe place for everyone that enters our school. And because those are the kids that are not going to learn.
So am I hearing that we know where Paul stands on that? Would the rest of you be comfortable if that last paragraph was just deleted?
Yeah.
Which one?
Yeah, and then we can change the face coverings and or shields may be encouraged above it.
Right. And we already have the events we have. It seems like everybody wants to wear a mask. So the majority will be wearing masks. And we don't know. It may last for 2 weeks and they may get tired of it and start taking it. We don't know. But again, things may change in 2 weeks. If the county mandates it,
right.
The state mandates it doesn't matter.
His background school. Right.
Right.
The governor hasn't mandated it.
Right. Right.
He's not naive to what teachers are going through.
Right.
Families are going
Definitely. So until that comes down.
Jason, I think a lot is going to happen, like what you experienced in the middle school, is that a number of students are going to come. They're going to either wear masks or not wear masks, and probably based on what their family's preference is and what they've been instructed at home. Some kids will follow what their parents have asked them to do, and some will not. And they'll be waiting to see what their friends are doing and willing to do. And if their friends are willing to wear masks, then they will more likely want to wear them as well. But I think it's a personal decision.
So what I'm hearing is it seems like there's a general consensus to eliminate the third paragraph.
I was reading it.
And,
It's fine too.
I know you didn't want it.
I read it multiple times.
Now, are we okay with that language there? Is it okay to encourage people to wear them indoors?
Oh, yeah.
I think so.
Yeah, we
I
can
think
encourage.
we
And
can
we have
definitely
that, and
encourage.
it's working.
We can definitely encourage, but to mandate it,
I don't want to see disciplinary issues.
correct.
And if they come from a family that doesn't want to wear them, it's going to create more of a problem. The few that we might get, it will make the child stand out as far as their behavior, and I don't want to see all that.
But regardless of whether there was a mandate or not a mandate at all levels, we have to be cognizant and aware and protect any kid against harassment or bullying
Right.
related to mask wearing or other adults from, the mask shaming and so forth. In that aspect. A question I guess I have for all of you as it relates to employees, because this doesn't, in this section doesn't really speak to that. What's the feelings or the sentiments on employees? Adults are at that greater likelihood of potentially spreading. All the districts in the area, and I do agree with this. I think if social distancing for an adult can't be maintained, to ask them to wear either a shield or a mask, unless they have one of those exceptions, which are plentiful. I guess I'd like to ask the employees to wear them in those scenarios. Now, we can leave it as encouraged, just like everything else. I think most adults probably will, but I guess is there a feeling or a sentiment, is it different for employee versus students or staff?
What do we do with kids who need to be able to, where lip reading is important?
The face shield, or we get some clear masks? They make them, I don't know.
I mean, the CDC highly discourages it for children who are learning to read.
That's why they updated their guidance to ask for, the clear masks to be worn by people and teachers. That's why we really look at the shields as a
We
potential
encourage
solution.
all K4 to 6th grade, all of our elementary schools, that they go to something like the shields, a teacher wear a mask, so that they're all learning to read at that age.
Yeah, I wouldn't be comfortable saying you can't wear a mask,
Yeah, I think.
but
Right.
I will make sure that they all have the option of the shield. And, we did get the voice amplifier to help with that, if we want to use that, but that doesn't show the lips.
Did we do any kind of survey that asked the staff what they prefer? I know we surveyed some.
No, not at this point. We were going to survey on the PPE equipment and the type for after, for the ordering purposes. I did bring in a small group to look at the different PPE and give me their input across the different grade bands and give feedback on what type of equipment that they'd like to have us consider. At this point, are there any other questions or thoughts in the proposal? I also have the notes to modify the lead.
The cohorts, we talked about it 2 weeks ago, and I asked about the middle school. And you said you were going to go back to the administration.
Yeah, Sarah, could you speak to what level of cohort modeling, what we're looking at for the base 6th grade, or 6th, 7th, and 8th grade, and our rationale on that? Could you come up to the mic so they can hear you at home?
Okay, so right now what we're looking at is to take a look at the alphabet and to divide the students up by alphabet. And then that's, like, let's say A through M will be cohort A, and then N through Z will be cohort B. But we're going to have to wait until we try to do that because we have students moving from class to class, and we can't guarantee that just an alphabetical cohort is going to reduce the numbers of students in all classrooms. However, it should help with reducing the classrooms that you can't physically distance in, so then we would be hopefully likely to find alternative settings then. that make sense? More alternative settings. Yeah. We have a lot of rooms in both the.
Yeah, the question was in regards to the middle school students rotating for science, math.
You mean in the traditional
social
model, not in
studies.
the cohort? Oh, I totally misunderstood. I'm sorry, no, we're still moving them just like they would normally move. Yep.
And that would be that base level. If we need to go to a higher mitigation, we could look at modifying that. But the sentiment, correct me if I'm wrong, Sarah, was that grouping the students together based on math level, which is what it would be, the risk reward, not the risk reward, but the benefit of bringing the kids back together in heterogeneous groupings rather than homogeneous groupings outweighed the benefit from cohorting them in the same group of kids for the entire year.
Yeah, we want to maintain that heterogeneous grouping as much as we possibly can.
If it's not working and the spread is there, we need to further go to a higher mitigation level, then we could modify that and go to a cohort.
Well, move it into a hybrid model.
Then we could lessen the numbers then that way. Yeah. Yeah. Does that one make sense though? Sorry, I misunderstood.
No, it does.
Okay.
I just asked the question.
Yeah,
Meaning,
okay.
wanted to see where we were with that.
Thank you.
You mentioned sanitation stations, and I had a question today from a parent asking if we're going to have hot water available for hand washing, because that is the recommendation over at sanitizer.
We have hot water and soap in all of our bathrooms, and we'll have sanitizers stations around the building, but we don't have like
So it's portable, right?
things.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah, those are. No, they don't.
The live feed, just curious, I have a soon-to-be six-grader. Is it going to be available? I know a lot of times teachers send out their daily in. I'm assuming kids are sick, they're not getting up for their 7:35 class and watching it live. Is there going to be links to that?
We plan to record, correct me if I'm wrong, sir, we plan to record all of those sessions. Mhm. And that's a best practice so that some kids can review it multiple times and if they need to. So it can be asynchronous, they have a doctor's appointment, they're not missing it.
We will never have discipline issues.
If we do, we've got an online option for kids.
Mom and Dad can watch it from home. It will be nice, right?
I wish actually the video won't, it'll be focused in on
It'll be
a
out of teacher.
small area.
How is the staff with that? If I was a staff person, that's love. Is that okay? Is that gone over well? Just to have the live feed.
It's a learning.
They're used to it.
We're recording the tool.
Okay.
Things that is on our good.
Which is
So
great.
I'm not gonna stay there and love it.
Okay.
But,
It's just a different style of teaching.
I think there's, it is, I've done that system, but, where I taught Spanish in Webster, Wisconsin, I had kids in Blood Crutter community. The difference is, and we've heard some comments along this lines is, well, what if I have that helicopter parent sitting in the background? You know, there's just some general anxiety related to, you're putting yourself out there more, where anyone in the household or so forth could look at it, be more critical and or scrutinize. And I think we'll have to be supportive of our teachers, get their back and recognize that's the case. But I also think that our parents will be supportive and understanding and recognize that they're really stretching and putting themselves out. This is, it took me probably 3 years before I really felt like, hey, I've got this now, teaching kids who aren't right in front of me and are over in a different community.
Yeah, I just
It's
want
an
families to be
adjustment.
sensitive
Yes,
to the added stress
yeah,
that puts on the staff.
I think
We're
absolutely.
in the microphone and trying to lower where you are in the classroom and just,
Yeah, we're gonna have some
yes,
kind of concern.
but there's gonna be a transition period.
But you know, I remember talking to staff when we went virtual last time, and even that was a change, and they were like, this is so hard. But we've got fantastic staff, hopefully with the right support. It's a learning curve, and we realize that. So I think we'll be fine. And if we need more support for certain staff, I hope we're willing to go that route, which I think we are.
Yes, we are. And I think it takes a lot of grace in the sense from, parents and families working with us, patience and understanding.
Yeah.
And a lot of patience and understanding from, teachers to students and so forth, from administration to teachers. And we'll have that patience and understanding. I believe and I see it, and I've seen it in emails to us, the support and the patience. It's not, I don't always see it, and Facebook is a terrible place to see it, but I do see it. It's out there, and that support's there. And I know from an administrative team and a leadership team, we'll have that patience and grace, and hopefully, I think our teachers will get that from the families as well. Other questions?
Is everyone comfortable with Mr. Taylor being able to modify the instructional model as he sees fit? I know Kevin had a question.
Tell me no more about this.
Well, my question on that, why doesn't he, I think that should be board authorized. I don't know. Can you explain to me why it should just be all on him? I think if he's making a major change, that's from the board. And then another, this is what, we're making changes on a document here. And I can't track what the proposed language was before this meeting and what we have now. So how is the record going to show any of these changes that we're discussing? I mean, it really bothers me. We just looked away and we just lost a paragraph under health. I went back to my prior emails. I can't find what the original draft was. It's already changed. So there's no records.
Ed, on all Google Docs and forms, I can go back to
There's
all
a
the
record of
previous
it.
changes.
Who changed it when they changed it? So if we need that, I'm sure that.
Yeah, we can provide that. It's automatically logged all in the document. We can modify this. The only reason why I put it on, I appreciate that, and I would rather it be on the board anyway, on the moving through the models. The reason why I put it in there is because if we have an outbreak in a school and I'm working with Health and Human Services, I need to, like a snow day, I need to make a decision, move to that. We could modify it, any instructional model that may last longer than X number of days, or we could modify that language to make it need board authorization. I'm fine with that. We just need 24 hours to schedule an emergency board meeting.
Right, and then you'd have to have, to make a change, then you would definitely have to have majority.
I think at this point, Jason, I need to trust you that you have the years of health services, and I trust that you that you don't jump the gun, because you're gonna have people asking you questions regardless.
Well, I wouldn't want to make a move or a decision like that without running it through you as the school board as well and updating on the situation and scenario. But we could always, modify it to hold a board meeting. Just takes 24 hours.
I think if you switch the model, though, if you go in, let's say you run the traditional, you switch it to hybrid, and it lasts, I don't know, X amount of time. The board could always, we were going to have meetings every 2 weeks. I mean, so we could always, we could always discuss that, right? And we could always bring that up if we wanted to say, okay, we need to discuss why we're still on the hybrid.
Right. It's a lot of work for Jason and
I think it's too hard for
administration team to be switching.
I think
You're
it's
not going to do it. Right.
Because it's going to be.
It's not going to be for a week at a time.
No.
And I don't need to vote on that right now. But I need to trust you and your team.
And I trust Jason on that. He's not going to switch unless he knows that.
That doesn't really answer your question.
Right, where you are to the criteria.
Right.
Well, the criteria you use is what Health and Human Services
This was being developed through Health and Human Services. We can approve this at this meeting with bringing back that protocol and review. I'm sorry, what's that?
Kevin's saying it doesn't say that in the motion, so we could say that, no.
Can we take out that line? Approve the rest of it? Come back to that.
We can do
I
anything.
don't have that exactly.
Well, maybe we should say acting superintendent, because what if he died?
Right. What if he gets COVID?
Well, I'm just saying, that it's a legal
And
document.
it would be Bill's responsibility, beyond Bill.
I just don't know if we should put your name in there.
I understand what you're saying. Yes, it should be position specific.
Well, okay, I remember when we went to shutting down the school in the spring.
Well, that wasn't our choice.
Yeah, I know, but we didn't vote on it. He changed it because he had to. So we didn't have to vote on it.
It wasn't his decision. It wasn't his decision.
It was his decision what day they were going to do it
It
though.
was my decision to, and I think we communicated on that it planned to close on, was it a Tuesday or a Monday? Yeah.
Right, but you had all the kids home and then you worked on a plan to have the staff come back Monday and Tuesday was this and so we didn't say we had to approve that.
Yeah, but he reached out to all of us.
Yeah,
Yeah,
right. And so that's why I'm saying the
I
situation, I can't see him being a czar and saying, oh, I'm just going to change this.
Well, I'd like my job, so I mean, it would, yes.
Well, we like you here.
We definitely want you here.
Well, and
Sorry, you just killed me, Julia.
I think if there were major problems, we're going to hear from
Yes.
staff,
But
administration.
I'm okay modifying that language too, because the only reason instructional model may not have been the best language in there, because if we were doing, it was more for being able to react if I need to shift the school to remote, kind of just like the inclement weather days, giving me the authority to go ahead and make that decision and move to that level. And all indications are that those are more likely going to be short intermittent unless we have really huge infection rates. And then we're going to be having conversations at the board level, and I'll want an emergency meeting anyway.
And chances are, there's going to be more action at the state level than at that level.
Or county level.
That's saying this is what's going to happen. Like, comfortable, but knowing any of that, hard to give someone.
But just look at how long it's taken us to get to this place. If he makes changes, I mean, it's all the way down the line, and that affects, every administrator, every staff member, every family. I can't see him just, anybody in that position that wants to stay in that position, just willy-nilly making crazy changes.
I didn't say something. It's not want to know how they're going to make.
Well, I understand that, but I think if he makes a change that's more than just, we're gonna go, not Monday, Tuesday, but we're gonna go.
Can't we approve this and then have you outline in more detail criteria later on? And
You could
I mean,
always see
school
more.
isn't starting until September.
This is, I think, this right here is the hang up.
Working document.
What's the criteria? Oh, you can't see. This slide's the hang up, and understandably so, because I don't have those transmission levels pinned down.
Right.
Yeah, but those we will have pinned down as best as possible, and I can share them with you as soon as the county's ready to share that. Yeah.
Low medication, for me, might be very different from low medication.
Well, and honestly, I can see a scenario happening where the flu is knocking kids out of school a lot faster than COVID. And,
Well, and hopefully not, we should see a positive impact on that as well, because kids with symptoms are staying at home.
well, hopefully.
So knock on wood, we should see lower infection rates in that. They've seen that nationally too, I think lower through that safe at home that you saw lower infection rates than the others. But, yeah, so that will be finalized, at a later, as soon as I have that done with the county, I know by the next board meeting, I could have that and have that finalized. But there still will be some ambiguity to it because even using, unless we just want to say we're just going to adopt the county measures, which I wouldn't recommend, I would ask them to look deeper into our community. And if the measure gets to that level, because that gives us greater flexibility and we're not having to move a level because Walworth had a big outbreak.
Yeah, there was a nursing home in Whitewater that had an outbreak. Well, that doesn't affect us.
So we give Jason the ability to move through probably one mitigation levels or whatever, but we ask him to bring us a guideline.
Yeah.
So we can review it.
Because we don't, the school isn't starting yet.
Correct.
The school isn't starting.
Right.
Correct. Yeah, I'm happy with that.
I don't think that word.
To get through the process.
Right.
Yeah.
I think it's good.
You'll have enough to do. You don't need to be
Well, I think he's going to want our input on anything that said.
Changes.
Sure. Because then there's shared responsibility along the lines of this is what we decided to do. And
right.
Because we're all going to get hit in the community saying, well, why'd you do that?
Yeah. Go to the grocery store.
This is why. Yeah, go to the grocery store.
What did you say?
Go to the grocery store. You will be asked.
Yep.
So, is that fair to everyone? Does everybody agree with that? So Jason will bring us, Mr. Tadlock will bring us.
We're working it right now.
Paul, did you have an opinion on that?
I really can't hear much, but nothing really stuck a nerve on what I could hear. So.
Okay.
Are there any other things we want to?
Well, I'm not happy with the mask issue because if we vote on it now, I'll say no. Because I just think that's about the weakest language I've ever seen. I'm just saying what I'm going to say. I mean, we lost that whole paragraph that, I don't know whether mask zones are allowed or not. I have no idea. Because we just lost the paragraph that gave us the ability
He's on it right now, Jason.
to have a.
So you want me to bring that paragraph back up?
Bring it up and let's see what it said. I mean, we should be able to, like I said, one is like food service. When they're dealing with food that they're going to be serving, they should be, and they may be standing next to each other on the same stove.
In the main office.
Well, there's certain areas, yeah, that could probably.
Jason, were you going to add that you're mandating all adults?
That wasn't the impression that I got.
We can always add it, want to, school has it started. I just can't see if you're, let's say you're the secretary and somebody walks in without a mask, you could say, we ask that you wear a mask, but the person absolutely refuses, what are they going to do? I think we have to look at
What if they're standing far enough away?
Right, and again, it's enforcing it can be the issue. I mean, do we want to call the police because someone's not wearing a mask? Maybe we do, maybe we don't, but I'm just not sure that's best use of our resources.
The police will not want us to come.
No, I know they wouldn't, but they are being called. If you look at social media, it's all over the country.
Yeah,
and if my thought is, if there's marks on the floor, I walk where those marks are. If everybody's wearing masks, I wear a mask. If the sign says you wear a mask, I wear a mask. I do what they ask me to do. Just, and are they going to drag me out the store? Probably not, but we can encourage it. But I would not call the police on it.
What would be the criteria for a teacher to require masks in Awesome.
We have to work on that as well. But Matt, language is going to be very hard.
I think it's gonna be proof medical.
I don't think it's very hard at all. If she's got a health condition, and yet she wants to teach a person, she's just gonna ask kids to wear a mask in her class. That's a common courtesy. And if they don't want to do that, then they can find a different class to take, or take it virtually.
Yeah.
And that's my opinion. It's 1 hour, not even an hour, for that student to sacrifice, so that teacher can be protected.
No, I meant like standing close to each other, like, you know.
You asked me the question about, and I answered it. So,
Well, I was talking a different scenario.
I mean, I'm talking about a professional that wants to continue to teach
I know.
face to face.
That's health issues.
That's how I want to protect that person.
And I can give you an example with having a rule and just enforcing it. Black Hawk Technical School this summer had a student that was adamant that they were not going to follow the rules and wear a mask. They were asked many times, they wouldn't do it. They got security to take them off. He has been removed from Black Hawk Technical School, not just for this term, permanently. So I mean, so there are all kinds of endeavors, whether it's an employment agency, whether it is a school, it's out there. And if we're preparing them for the future, don't teach them resistance now so that they can get caught later.
If a district has a requirement, and if it's in a specific zone or specific scenario, legal has answered this question. They basically said the due process that a student would need to be removed from that setting would be 2 warnings. So first warning, after the second warning, the school legally would have the authority to move them to an online platform or a different setting.
Right, it's kind of like our expulsion thing. If they're being insubordinate and they've been asked multiple times and they refuse, I don't see why, just like our expulsion things, where we give them educational opportunities in a different environment then. It still meets their needs and they can have their way and we can move forward as well.
That's a mandate. That's not a recommendation.
In particular circumstances, I'm not saying in every classroom. I'm just saying if a particular teacher has a look.
Yeah, that's why I asked the question. It can't be personal preference on the teacher's part. It has to be a medical reason. There has to be a documented proof of medical
I'm good
need.
with that.
Because I'm not.
Yeah, and that's fine, but I was talking different situations, like in a certain location that for a certain class, they might need to wear a mask, a lab class or something like that. So,
Where social distancing is not possible.
right.
So if we were to require the staff member in order to be able to require, face coverings to be worn in their class, to need a doctor's note. The next question that will come up is like the Americans Disability is only around the worker. So do you then extend it to their concern, because a lot of our staff members have legitimate concerns over someone in their household. Right. So their fear may not be for their own health in catching that, but it may be to protect their loved ones.
Most businesses are voting against that.
So the only reason why, I think in something like this, we could have our discretion because it's something that we're giving discretion for, but I can tell you for leave purposes and so forth, legal is very adamant that stick to the disability qualifications, which is only the individual, so that you don't open yourself up for discriminatory practices or claims.
And that's what, from the research I've done, most businesses have to adopt that.
But that may not be as relevant in this type of situation if the board's saying that you're open to, when there's those health concerns, requiring the students when they can't social distance to
I guess that's why I asked the question earlier is, at what point do you make that requirement or allow a teacher to have that requirement? Are we Are we, say we have a 4K teacher, 5K, a 5K teacher that has a medical condition. Are you gonna really require 4 and 5-year-olds to wear masks for 8 hours?
I would say that's not recommended by the CDC, probably not practical, and we could look at different position shifts or changes.
I guess I'm not in favor of that at all at the elementary level.
In favor of them.
It,
Or recommend they can wear them.
they can wear them if they want.
So Ed, I guess I misunderstood previously, is that as worded, is that what you're saying you're wanting included, or?
Yes.
Is there from the other board members, and basically going back to the straw poll, is there support if that paragraph's reinserted with the may instead of the will?
Well, why do we even have to say there's prevalence of COVID in the community? We can just say, I mean, because.
Yeah.
You don't even have to say that.
I know, that's what I'm
Distancing is
saying,
not
so it doesn't have to
possible.
be there, it can be for a specific situation.
It's right now, so I believe that reference to COVID because it's.
Right, because of this, right,
This
it's,
sentence is right about.
Yeah, it basically says the same thing twice.
no, it doesn't, it says encourage, but the other one says it may be required. The middle paragraph does not say anything about a requirement, the last one does talk about a
Can
requirement.
we, I guess I'd like that more specific at the second sentence. Face coverings and shields may be required in certain areas of classrooms at the middle school and high school levels.
Well, I think we need both sentences. Because we're going to be encouraging them.
Right, but it says that in the first sentence.
She wants to make it specific to middle school. High
I
school.
want the may be required part only for middle school and high schoolers, not at the elementary level. The sentence before that still says that we're encouraging all students,
Right, right.
but the may be required are specifically for middle school and high school.
Originally, the delineation was for when we're at higher need mitigation levels, that, okay, we may now need to require the face coverings when we can't socially distance, as opposed to in that general level, there's not a lot of prevalence of COVID that we're encouraging. So, but that's fine. I think I understand it creates some confusion or potentially ambiguity because then people are saying, well, what's prevalence level or what's.
Right. I like this better. Is that?
Does that make sense to people or am I not making sense?
No, I'm good with the redrafted language.
Okay.
But now if we say 6 to 12, is that, I mean, does that take into the consideration of what you said you had a teacher that had a health condition?
I think from the survey that I saw of the inputs of concern, thought I was getting the majority of the people at the higher levels.
Yeah.
Okay, so the 6 to 12.
Yeah, you're right.
But you know, okay, at 6 to 12, but yeah, there was a teacher in this district who was going through chemo treatments, but was still teaching classes. And she was teaching my child about what it was like to go through it, and she was a great teacher, but I can't imagine her teaching during this.
I think that's something that we could still reach out to families if we had a unique situation like that at the elementary level and said due to certain health concerns, we wouldn't even have to divulge. It might be a kid in the classroom.
Right.
Just like we do with peanut butter allergies.
Yeah.
We'd say, hey, this is something that we'd like to see in this classroom. If you're not comfortable with that, we're happy to shift you to another class.
Yeah.
We could still do that and have the voluntary commitment to that.
And I like having that we may require it in those situations. Yeah, the second, do we have anything in there about encouraging everyone in the building, like volunteers to come in or, does that include everything? I'm just asking. Kind of a legal thing.
No, it doesn't clearly articulate it in this section. I'm trying to think.
Yeah,
Is there another
sometimes I
section
think
that
you
it
could
does?
say they should, coverings and shields will be encouraged to be worn indoors by all people. I don't know.
I think just leaving it there, just encouraged to be worn indoors. It's irrelevant who you are.
Yeah.
It's general enough that if you're a volunteer, our recommendation is we are going to encourage everybody. So I think it's general enough that that would work.
Okay.
So if an adult
Just making
doesn't
sure.
want to wear a face covering, they're still allowed in.
Well, and we may not have them volunteer again if it's an issue. If we're looking at a volunteer.
Yeah.
Like if they're reading one-on-one with the kids. I don't know. I think this has got to be a fluid enough document because a month from now, we may be looking at something different. We don't know.
Do you want to modify the language on slide 15? If he's capable of doing that now, I know when we were looking at it before you could change it. Slide 15 had to do with the sick days.
Yeah.
Sorry.
I don't know if this is even
Yeah, it needs to be.
needed. 'Cause
I like keeping it the same for all staff.
Does that make sense, Paul, and capture?
Yeah,
what you're-
I'm trying to read the paper right now. I had to go to my own slide because yours was too small.
Oh, sorry. Is that any better?
I'm on my own slide, and it did your modification, so I can follow there.
The combination will not necessarily get them eligible for long-term disability.
Right.
So it isn't going to be enough time.
2 weeks, 10 days, 50. Well, then they would need to use their sick leave.
Right.
Which would get
The
them.
way it's written, it almost implies to get them there.
Yeah, that's
Okay.
time we did.
I just want to clarify, that's all.
Yeah.
Maybe the thought, but you shouldn't put that in there.
Correct. So maybe just say.
Well, and it may not be a long-term disability qualifier.
Right, so just 40 days.
Yeah, that's.
So that's a good catch.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Good catch.
Thanks, Paul.
We don't want to insinuate something else.
Okay. Anything else? And I'll go back up to that motion and see if do you want that page I added in there? Does that make sense?
That last sentence isn't a full.
I was just gonna say, well, other than the fact that it's not a.
Yeah, it's like, what does it say? I think it's supposed to be like comma pending.
Or a semicolon, it would need to be a semicolon because it's a sub, you know.
Right, but it's not a full sentence, that's what I'm saying.
Correct. It would actually be. Apostrophe S.
Words we use.
And counties would be. Pick the word out.
Well, pending is still, that is not a full.
Correct.
It's sentence, starting with pending. So pending could be small with a comma before it.
Semicolon would be more proper, but.
do we even want this sentence in there, or do we need it?
I don't need it. I don't.
Yeah.
I think we just reference it as the motion. We'll just reference it in the motion.
Yeah.
We'll review. I'll put on the agenda for August 10th to review the Walworth County's CDC mitigation guidelines. We can always revisit the whole motion or the movement if we want to. It's really goes down to that one slide in which levels.
Yeah, I don't care. We can take that sentence out.
All right.
Any other? Otherwise, I will
So on the motion, should we have it as, I move to reopen the schools for the 2020-21 school year as presented and provide Superintendent Jason Tadlock the authority to move between and modify instructional models?
It sounds like a good motion.
Modified? We modified it or.
I guess we modified it. We changed it.
It really wasn't ever a motion though.
Oh,
so,
that's right.
so this is, that's why this was all really a draft until pinned down.
Yeah.
Okay.
Is there a second?
Because I think we want to make sure it's in accordance to what we've already gone through, and that's what goes out to the public, and the community gets to see it as we did, and not just have a blanket, as it is going to change, but they know where we're starting.
You want to say, instead of schools up where you're in school district? Or is that not inclusive of the?
No, I'll put it in school districts all options. That's,
Well, just reopening schools, should we be saying specifically our schools?
It's all the ones we control, so.
I know, but I still do.
Ready for a motion? I move to reopen the schools for the 2021 school year and provide Superintendent Jason Tadlock the authority to move between the modified instructional models and plans as finalized this evening, with note that specifically slide 7 of the PowerPoint will have later conversation regarding levels of mitigation regarding working with Walworth County with Health and Human Services.
For a second.
Was that whole thing the motion?
Yes, it was.
okay.
Because I'm just specifically referencing that we will
Oh.
further visit.
That's right. We've got it recorded, so we'll get it typed up in a minute.
So Kevin, some second. All right, so I have a motion and a second to reopen the schools for the 2020-2021 school year and provide Superintendent Jason Tadlock the authority to move between and modify instructional models as presented, with the caveat that we will return to slide 7, and is it?
Yes.
To review the mitigation strategies recommended by Warwick County Health and Human Services. Fair?
Yes.
Any other
Start with
discussion?
someone else.
Any other discussion before we go forward with voting?
So, what exactly are we, we're just approving the reopening of schools, but we're not approving the plan?
The plan.
No, we're approving the plan. We're just looking at that change, the mitigation change.
We just want to review the mitigation.
Okay, I didn't hear that.
So we're reviewing everything.
All I heard was that we're recommending to reopen the schools, but I did not hear in that motion that we're approving the plan as presented.
Well, as presented, he said as modified.
As modified and
Okay.
Yeah, he did say that.
He did.
I
Okay.
said as presented.
Yeah.
All right. I just wanted to make sure I knew exactly what I.
No, that's fine.
No,
That's why I
that's
asked. Anybody else? Anything else before we vote?
All right. Roll call. Mrs. Fisher,
Yes.
Mr. Gayheart,
Yes.
Mrs. Ingersoll,
Yes.
Mr. Martell,
yes, as long as the health is the required distancing and faces.
all right, Mr. O'Donnell,
Yes.
What did he say? Yeah, what did he say? Yes, but what, Paul?
As long as we are very focused on the when social distancing is not possible, that it's mandated. That we change that, and then you have okay to start it up with you.
so I think your section, Paul, as it reads, is modified. It's in question: when social distancing is not possible, face coverings and or shields may be required in certain areas and classrooms at the 6 to 12 grade levels.
Correct. As long as we're consistent and do follow that, then I'm okay.
All right.
So if a teacher says we're in close proximity, you will be wearing them, and we support that, then I can go with it. And on paper, that's what it says. So I'm going to assume that we'll follow through.
But he's just voting. So.
Mrs. Gray,
He's just having a comment on this.
Yeah, he's a comment on his yes.
On this vote, that's all.
So it's a yes.
So he didn't amend.
No. No, just his comment.
Yes.
okay, and Mr. Scarrow.
Yes.
Motion carried.
I want to compliment the board. I know this is a topic with a lot of emotion and pressure, unlike any other motion that we've ever had, interest from the public and the community. And the fact that we could have these conversations, I know it took a long time to get to that point, but do it in a respectful manner and not be disagreeable as we talk about it. I really appreciate that, and kudos goes to the school board for that. Thank you.
Yeah, like I said at the beginning of the whole thing, and so no matter what happens, I think the group of people that we have from our staff all the way to the board level, I can't think of a better group of people to go through this with, because honestly, this is going to be difficult. No doubt about it. So, we'll get through it though. I know that. The kids are looking to us for stability and comfort.
Yeah, we still have more to go.
Yes, we do actually. That's what
Actually, it's revitalizing kind of doing here. I think
I got the easy stuff now. All right, recommendations on district administrator.
All right, I have a number of personnel items for the school board this evening, so I'm going to talk them up.
Probably got lost.
I like my computer better than yours, though. There we go. I'll try to blow that up for, let's see, those of you at home. Okay. First up, we have a transfer of Brittany Knoll to the high school as a special education teacher assistant. She'll be transferring from Jacksonville High School. We have a resignation of Caitlin Oliver, who's been serving as a West Side special education teacher. I want to wish her well as she moves on to staying home with her kids, and wish her the best. We have a resignation of Mr. Jeff Tischer as a middle school cross-country assistant coach. Resignation of Mr. Shackleton as a middle school football assistant coach. A resignation of Mr. Neinfeld as a middle school track assistant coach. And a resignation of Jenna Rand as a middle school girls basketball assistant coach. A resignation of Mr. Dodd Davey as a middle school girls basketball assistant coach. An appointment of Rolando Sanchez as a high school football assistant coach. A appointment of Ben Burrows as a high school boys soccer assistant coach. Sam Novak, appointed as another boys soccer assistant coach of the high school. And Austin Bacchus as a high school boys soccer assistant coach. Appointment of Duncan Morgan as a high school boys soccer assistant coach. Dan Birch as a high school girls volleyball assistant coach. Alyssa Hochhammer as a high school girls volleyball assistant coach. Jeff Brown as a middle school girls basketball assistant coach. And that's been facilitated because the middle school season was moved, in case you're curious. Paul Schneider as a middle school girls basketball assistant coach. Chris McLaren as a middle school football assistant coach. Mark Coles as a middle school football assistant coach, and Chris Rudolph as a middle school football assistant coach.
I have one question.
Yes.
Girls volleyball assistant coach, Alyssa, do we have a lot of numbers, and that's why that's an added position?
Yes, they've had a lot of numbers for several years, and so we added that to assist in that division of the programs, and it helps facilitate our non-cut practice that we have, especially with the lower levels.
Okay.
Other questions? Otherwise, I'm looking for a motion.
I move to approve the personnel recommendation sheet for July 27, 2020, including new employment contracts conditioned upon passing the background check and district mandated drug screening as presented.
Is there a second?
I'll second.
It's been moved and seconded to approve the personnel recommendation sheet for July 27, 2020, including new employment contracts, conditioned upon passing the background check and district mandated drug screening as presented. Roll call vote, please.
Mrs. Fisher?
Yes.
Mr. Gayheart?
Yes.
Mrs. Ingersoll?
Yes.
Mr. Martell?
Yes.
Mr. O'Donnell?
Yes.
Mrs. Ray?
Yes.
Mr. Scarrow?
Yes.
Motion carried. School gifts, this is Brian's, right? Skip over that. Appointment of the school district attorney. For several years, that's been Godfrey Leslie Buckman and Howard. Looks like Mr. Tedlock is recommending to continue with them. We haven't really had any issues with them. There's no increase in the hourly fee. I don't think there has been in years, not for the last one.
It's been
A long time. Questions, concerns? All right, looking for a motion to approve them.
I'll move to retain the law firm of Godfrey, Lively, Blackburn, and Howard through July 26, 2021 as presented.
Is there a second?
I'll second.
So moved and seconded to approve the law firm of Godfrey, Lively, Blackburn, and Howard through July 26, 2021 as presented. Roll call vote, please.
Mrs. Fisher?
Yes.
Mr. Gayheart?
Yes.
Mrs. Ingersoll?
Yes.
Mr. Martell?
Yes.
Mr. O'Donnell?
Yes.
Mrs. Ray?
Yes.
Mr. Scarrow?
Yes.
Motion carried. Second reading of revised professional staff, support staff, employee handbooks.
Oh, yeah, that was a big one.
I did not have any questions or comments related to that were brought up.
Okay. Any questions for Mr. Tedlock? Otherwise, looking for a motion to approve.
I move to approve the revised professional staff and support staff employee handbooks as presented.
Is there a second?
Second.
It's been moved and seconded to approve the revised professional staff and support staff employee handbooks as presented. Roll call vote, please.
Mrs. Fisher,
Yes.
Mr. Gayheart,
Yes.
Mrs. Ingersoll,
Yes.
Mr. Martell,
Yes.
Mr. O'Donnell,
Yes.
Mrs. Ray,
Yes.
Mr. Scarrow.
Yes.
Motion carried. Announcements?
Okay, just a couple of announcements, just because of the gap between now and August 10th. I want to make you aware of new hires that came in right at the end of the week last week, or that will be recommendations on the next board agenda. Amy Cruz serves as a kindergarten teacher at Westside, Leah Obling as a special education teacher at Westside, and Melissa Humke, thank you, as a first grade teacher at Jackson. So I just want to make sure that you guys heard those recommendations from me first before it gets out on Facebook or others.
Question,
Yes,
have you had any applicants for the boys assistant swimming coach?
I do not know, I'll have to check with Mr. Oh, I just want to mention a reminder, graduation is August 6th. And they did send out notice that prom is scheduled. We have some processes and things in place for August, as we promised the kids, if we get 50 kids to sign up for. Or we can't run the event at Grand Geneva. So numbers are low right now, but maybe they're just procrastinate or they don't want to go to events in August and with everything that's going on. So we'll see. I know there is some interest there. We'll see if the numbers get there.
Do we have a date tonight?
It's August 15th, I believe, for the prom. It's a Saturday. It might be the, I think it's the 15th.
It is. It's
Yeah.
11th is the election.
Yes, so they did add an additional room so we can do some spacing. We'll seat the kids in a cohort at the table and encourage them to dance with their cohort. Obviously, there's, kids choosing not to dance with their cohort. They very well may dance with other people outside their cohort, but we'll encourage that. I think that's all I have for announcements.
You have a motion there?
I'll make a motion to adjourn.
Second. I beat to it.
Roll call vote. Moved and seconded to adjourn.
Mrs. Fisher,
Yes.
Mr. Gayheart,
Yes.
Mrs. Ingersoll,
Yes.
Mr. Martell,
Yes.
Mr. O'Donnell,
Yes.
Mrs. Ray, Mr. Scarrow.
Yes.
Motion carried.
Okay.
Get some sleep.